You've been drinking today. Your eyes are glassy, you're sweating, and it smells like alcohol in here.
No, I'm having trouble breathing, please.
Yeah, I've heard it before. Look at me. How much have you had?
I'm pregnant. This is a towel. My water
Slurring your
broke.
words doesn't help.
My
Step out of the vehicle.
My water broke.
Having a baby shouldn't make you act.
Officer Dylan Hunt had 9 years on the force and 17 complaints in his file when he made the worst decision of his career on a Tuesday morning in Riverside Heights. He saw a silver Honda Accord with a Black Lives Matter bumper sticker driving through the affluent suburban neighborhood, and something in his mind clicked. The driver was not speeding. No traffic violations were happening, but Hunt decided to follow the car anyway. 4 blocks later, he found his excuse and flipped on his lights. The woman behind the wheel was Johanne Grimes, a 32-year-old hospital administrator, 7 months pregnant and rushing to an emergency OB/GYN appointment. She was also the wife of Michael Grimes, the city's brand new police chief who had started his position just 14 days earlier. What happened next would destroy Hunt's career, trigger a federal civil rights investigation, expose decades of protected racism within the department, and cost the city $6 million. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. Hunt's supposed behavior was not an aberration. It was the climax of a career built on racially profiled stops and a culture within the department that protected his excessive behavior. That failure of leadership was about to cost everyone dearly, most especially a pregnant woman fighting for her life and her unborn child. It was 10:23 a.m. when Hunt spotted the silver Honda. The car was moving exactly at the speed limit through Riverside Heights, a neighborhood he had been deliberately patrolling for the past 3 weeks. Everything about the vehicle and its operation was legal, but Hunt pulled in behind it and started following. He was looking for a reason, any reason, to justify what he had already decided to do. For 4 blocks he tailed that Honda, waiting and watching. When the car changed lanes and he claimed to see a broken taillight, though video evidence would later prove the light was functioning perfectly, Hunt had his excuse. The lights went on, the stop was initiated, and a chain of events began that nobody could take back. Johanne saw the flashing lights in her rearview mirror and felt a wave of panic that had nothing to do with being pulled over. The cramping in her abdomen had been intensifying for the past 20 minutes. She had called her OB/GYN from a red light, and the nurse's urgent tone had terrified her. Get here now. Don't stop for anything. But she did exactly what her husband had taught her to do during their difficult conversations about officer safety. She pulled over carefully, put the car in park, turned off the engine, and placed both hands on the steering wheel where they could be clearly seen. One hand instinctively moved to her belly, feeling the concerning tightness. Hunt approached the vehicle with his hand already resting on his weapon. His body camera was recording everything, though he seemed to have completely forgotten that fact. That footage would later become the evidence that buried him. The body cam would capture not just his words, but the face of a man who had targeted this stop deliberately, who knew exactly whose car he was pulling over, and who was about to learn that some lines, once crossed, destroy everything. Johanne lowered her window slowly, hands trembling now from pain and fear. She expected the standard request for license and registration. What she got instead told her everything she needed to know about why she had been pulled over. Hunt's first question was not about the supposed tail lash. It was not a request for documents. Leaning down to peer into her vehicle, his eyes scanning the interior with open suspicion, he demanded to know what she was doing in this neighborhood. The question hung in the air like a threat. The implication was crystal clear and absolutely sickening. A black woman driving through an affluent white neighborhood must not belong there, must be up to something, must need to be questioned, controlled, put in her place. Johanne, despite the waves of pain now radiating through her lower back, responded with the careful politeness she had learned was necessary for survival. I live here, officer. I'm on my way to my doctor. I'm having pregnancy complications, and I really need to— Step out of the vehicle, Hunt interrupted, his hand moving from his weapon to his handcuffs. That's when Johanne realized with horrifying clarity that this stop was not routine. This stop was personal, and she was in serious danger.
What neither of them knew in that moment was that across the street, behind a hedge of perfectly manicured bushes, a retired teacher named Margaret Chen had already pulled out her phone and started recording. Within the next 18 minutes, she would be joined by 14 other neighbors, all capturing different angles of a traffic stop that would become a national scandal. The body cam footage shows Hunt's face in those first moments, the cold calculation, the barely concealed contempt, and the dangerous certainty of a man who believed he was untouchable. He had no idea he was standing in front of the new police chief's wife. He had no idea she was actually in medical distress, and he had no idea that his next words, captured forever on digital video, would become the smoking gun in a federal prosecution. "Ma'am, you need to understand something." His voice dripped with mockery. "I was expecting a black bleed, and you don't look pregnant to me." The body cam captured it all. Every word, every inflection, every ounce of malice. And in the background, you can hear something else on the recording. The growing murmur of shocked neighbors, the click of phone cameras, and the distant sound of Johanne Grimes beginning to weep. The traffic stop was now 23 seconds old. It would last another 17 minutes and 42 seconds before Johanne's water broke in a gush of blood on the pavement, before backup arrived to find a scene of absolute chaos, and before Officer Dylan Hunt's entire world came crashing down around him. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. First, you need to understand exactly how a routine traffic stop became a federal case, how a 9-year veteran with a badge and a gun decided to terrorizing a pregnant woman was somehow part of his job, and how the entire infrastructure of a police department worked to protect officers like Dylan Hunt, right up until the moment when protecting him became impossible. Because the woman writhing in pain on the pavement wasn't just any citizen. She was the police chief's wife, and absolutely nothing would ever be the same.
Johanne Grimes woke up at 6:47 a.m. to sunlight streaming through the curtains of their new bedroom in Riverside Heights. She placed both hands on her rounded belly, feeling the gentle flutter of movement that still amazed her after 7 months. The baby was active this morning, a good sign after the concerning ultrasound last week that had shown slightly low amniotic fluid levels. In the kitchen, Michael was already dressed in his uniform, watching the morning news while pouring coffee he knew she couldn't drink. The television anchor's voice filled their quiet moment. In his second week as the city's first black police chief, Michael Grimes has already announced plans for comprehensive reforms to the department's use of force policies and community oversight procedures. Michael grinned at her. "They're really milking this story." Johanne smiled back, settling into a chair with her herbal tea and oatmeal. "You're making history, baby. Get used to it." That's when the first cramp hit, a sharp, twisting sensation low in her abdomen that made her gasp and grip the edge of the table. Michael was beside her instantly, his hand on her shoulder. "What's wrong?" "Just Braxton Hicks," she said, though the intensity worried her. "Probably overdid it yesterday unpacking boxes." But as Michael kissed her goodbye 20 minutes later, another cramp seized her, stronger this time. She waited until his patrol car pulled out of the driveway before calling her OB/GYN's office, her voice steadier than she felt. Across town, Officer Dylan Hunt arrived at the precinct already angry. The morning briefing had been full of the new chief's policy changes, mandatory de-escalation training, body camera audits, revised pursuit protocols. In the locker room afterward, Hunt slammed his locker door hard enough to make other officers look up. "Affirmative action bullshit," he muttered to Officer Brad Stevens, who was carefully staying neutral. 2 weeks and he thinks he can change everything. This department ran fine before he showed up with his reform agenda. Stevens said nothing, but Hunt didn't need agreement. He was already planning his patrol route, Riverside Heights, where the local newspaper had helpfully published a photo essay about the new chief's family moving into their dream home on Maple Street. He'd memorized the silver Honda Accord visible in the driveway, the Black Lives Matter bumper sticker visible in the photo. At 10:25 a.m., Hunt turned onto Riverside Boulevard, driving slowly past manicured lawns and expensive cars. He was looking for something specific. At 10:29 a.m., Johanne pulled out of her driveway, one hand on the wheel and one pressed against her cramping abdomen, her OB/GYN's urgent words echoing in her mind. Don't stop for anything. At 10:23 a.m., Dylan Hunt spotted the silver Honda 4 blocks ahead and felt a cold satisfaction settle over him. He flipped on his lights. The flashing lights filled Joanne's rearview mirror at exactly 10:23 a.m., and her first thought was disbelief. She was driving the speed limit, hadn't run any lights, hadn't done anything that warranted being pulled over. But the cramping had intensified to the point where arguing seemed impossible, so she signaled carefully and pulled to the curb in front of a pale yellow house with rose bushes blooming in the yard. She placed both hands on the steering wheel, exactly as Michael had taught her during their difficult conversations about traffic stops. Through her side mirror, she watched Hunt approach, his gait casual but his hand resting on his weapon. The body cam light blinked red on his chest. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Hunt's tone was sharp, accusatory before she'd even opened her mouth. "No, officer, I don't." Joanne kept her voice measured despite another cramp twisting through her lower back. "I was driving the speed limit and—" "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" The question hit her like a slap. Not about traffic, not about violations, about whether she belonged here. Joanne felt her face flush with humiliation and anger, but she swallowed both. "I live here, officer, on Maple Street. I'm on my way to Riverside Medical Center. I have a doctor's appointment and I'm experiencing license and registration." Hunt cut her off, his eyes scanning the interior of her car with undisguised suspicion. Joanne's hands trembled as she reached for her purse, moving slowly and deliberately. "Officer, I need you to know that I'm 7 months pregnant and I'm having complications. My doctor told me to come in immediately. If you could please, ma'am, I need your documents, now." She handed them over, her license showing her Riverside Heights address, her registration current and valid. Hunt studied them with exaggerated care, as if looking for something wrong. Another contraction seized her, and she couldn't suppress a small cry of pain. Hunt's eyes snapped to her face. "Are you on something?" "What? No, I'm pregnant. I'm in pain." Joanne's composure finally cracked. "Please, I need to get to my doctor. Can you just give me a warning for whatever you think I did and let me go?" "Your left tail light is broken. That's a safety violation." Joanne knew with absolute certainty that her taillight wasn't broken. Michael had just inspected the car 3 days ago. "Officer, that's not possible. The lights are all functioning. You can check. Step out of the vehicle." Across the street, Margaret Chen paused while watering her garden, her attention caught by the raised voices. She watched the officer's aggressive stance, saw the obvious distress of the woman in the car, and something told her this wasn't right. She pulled her phone from her pocket and started recording. 2 houses down, a jogger stopped running. A man walking his dog slowed his pace. The neighborhood was watching now. Hunt didn't notice. His hand moved to his handcuffs, his jaw set with determination. "Officer, please," Joanne begged, tears starting to stream down her face. "Something is wrong with my baby. I'm begging you. Step out of the vehicle right now, or I will remove you myself." The body cam captured everything. Every word, every tear, every second of a traffic stop that had already gone catastrophically wrong. Joanne's breath came in short gasps now, each contraction stronger than the last. She could feel something fundamentally wrong happening inside her body, a pressure, a wetness, a terror that transcended the officer standing at her window. "Please, officer, I need to call my doctor. Just let me make one phone call to let them know I'm delayed." "You're not calling anyone until this stop is complete." Hunt's voice was flat, unmovable. "But my baby!" Joanne's voice broke into a sob. "Something's wrong. I can feel it. Please, I'm begging you." Behind Hunt, the audience was growing. Margaret Chen's phone was still recording. A man in running clothes had stopped on the sidewalk, his expression troubled. 2 teenage boys on bikes had paused at the corner. An elderly couple stood on their porch, the woman's hand over her mouth. Hunt seemed to sense the attention, and it only made him more aggressive. "Ma'am, I need you to calm down and comply with my instructions. Your behavior is giving me cause for concern." "My behavior?" Joanne's fear was transforming into disbelief. "I'm 7 months pregnant and having a medical emergency. What behavior are you talking about?" Hunt leaned down closer to her window, his eyes cold and calculating. "Ma'am, you need to understand something. I was expecting a black blood, and you don't look pregnant to me." The words hung in the air like poison. Margaret Chen's gasp was audible even from across the street. The man jogging had his phone out now too. The body cam captured it all, every syllable of the most damning sentence Dylan Hunt would ever speak. Johanne stared at him in absolute horror, unable to process what she just heard. "What did you just say to me?" "You heard me. Now step out of the vehicle." Another contraction ripped through her, this one so powerful that Johanne doubled over, her hand instinctively reaching for her phone on the passenger seat. She needed help. She needed her doctor. She needed her husband. She needed anyone but this man who had just said the most viciously racist thing she'd ever heard directed at her. "Don't move," Hunt shouted, his hand going to his weapon as he saw her reach across the seat. "I'm just getting my phone," Johanne cried out, but Hunt was already yanking her door open. "Hands where I can see them." "I'm pregnant, stop!" But Hunt wasn't stopping. His hands grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the door opening despite her screams, despite the growing witnesses of a crowd of horrified neighbors with phones raised, Hunt standing there like a statue. Johanne felt herself being dragged from the car, her pregnant belly scraping against the steering wheel. The pain was unbearable now, radiating through her entire body. And then she felt it, the warm gush of fluid, the horrifying release that meant everything had just gotten infinitely worse. Her water had broken. Johanne's knees hit the pavement hard as Hunt pulled her from the vehicle. The impact sent shockwaves of pain through her body, and then she felt it. The gush of fluid mixed with something darker, something terrifying. Blood soaked through her maternity pants, spreading in a widening stain across the concrete. "Oh my God!" Margaret Chen's voice cut through the air. "She's bleeding! Someone called 911!" The crowd of witnesses surged forward instinctively, but Hunt threw up his hand. "Everyone stay back. This woman is resisting arrest." "Resisting arrest?" The man in running clothes was recording now, his voice shaking with anger. "She's pregnant and bleeding. What is wrong with you?" Johanne collapsed onto her side, curled around her belly, blood-soaked towels from her emergency kit clutched in her trembling hands. She was sobbing now, great heaving cries of pain and terror. "My baby! Please! My baby!" Hunt stood frozen, his hand still on his weapon, his face showing the first cracks of uncertainty. The body cam captured his expression, the moment a man realized he'd made a catastrophic mistake but couldn't figure out how to undo it. The sound of a second patrol car's siren cut through the chaos. Officer Sarah Chen arrived at 10:41 a.m., exactly 18 minutes into the traffic stop. She took one look at the scene, the bleeding woman on the ground, the growing pool of fluid, the crowd of horrified neighbors with phones raised, Hunt standing there like a statue, and immediately grabbed her radio. "Dispatch, I need an ambulance at Riverside Boulevard and Oak Street immediately. Pregnant female, active labor, possible complications." "Chen, I didn't authorize," Hunt started. "Dylan, what the hell did you do?" Chen was already kneeling beside Johanne, her training overriding everything else. "Ma'am, help is coming. Can you tell me your name?" Johanne could barely speak through the contractions. Johanne Grimes." Chen's hands were checking for a pulse, assessing the bleeding. "Grimes? Do you have family we can call?"
"My husband." Johanne's voice was barely a whisper. "Michael Grimes. He's your chief." The color drained from Chen's face. She looked up at Hunt, whose expression had gone from uncertain to absolutely stricken. "Dylan, tell me you didn't just pull over the chief's wife." Hunt said nothing. The body cam captured his face perfectly. The moment of terrible realization, the absolute collapse of whatever justification he'd built in his mind. The ambulance arrived at 10:44 a.m. At 10:47 a.m., dispatch radioed that Chief Grimes had been notified and was en route. At 10:52 a.m., multiple police vehicles converged on the scene, sirens wailing. At 10:58 a.m., Chief Michael Grimes's patrol car screeched to a halt. He was out before it fully stopped, running toward where paramedics were loading his wife onto a stretcher. "Johanne, baby, I'm here." The crowd parted for him. The cameras captured everything. The chief in full uniform, his face twisted in anguish, falling to his knees beside the stretcher. Johanne reaching for him with blood-stained hands. The embrace. The tears. And behind them, Officer Dylan Hunt, standing alone in the middle of the street, his entire world crumbling around him, while the body cam recorded his destruction.
Margaret Chen uploaded her video to Twitter at 11:34 a.m. with shaking hands and a simple caption. Pregnant black woman pulled over in Riverside Heights. Officers said she doesn't look pregnant. Her water broke on the pavement. This is what racism looks like. By 12:15 p.m., it had 10,000 views. By 1 p.m., it was trending nationally. By 2 p.m., every major news network was leading with the story. The footage was devastating. Multiple angles from multiple witnesses, all telling the same horrific story. Hunt's body cam audio was the worst, his voice dripping with contempt as he said those words, "I was expecting a black blood, and you don't look pregnant to me." The image of Johanne on the pavement, blood soaking through her clothes, clutching towels to her stomach while Hunt stood over her claiming she was resisting arrest. The outrage was immediate and volcanic. #Justice for Johanne trended worldwide. Civil rights organizations issued statements within hours. The video had been shared over 2 million times by evening. By 3 p.m., news vans lined the streets outside police headquarters. Reporters shouted questions at every officer entering or leaving the building. Is it true the victim is the chief's wife? How many complaints did Officer Hunt have? Will there be criminal charges? Inside, Chief Michael Grimes sat in his office facing an impossible situation. His wife was in the hospital, having delivered their daughter prematurely at 31 weeks, 3 pounds, 2 ounces, rushed immediately to the NICU. And he was supposed to investigate the officer who had caused it. Every instinct screamed at him to destroy Hunt's career personally, but he knew that would compromise any prosecution. He needed to recuse himself, needed to call in outside investigators, needed to be the chief the city hired him to be, even while his world was falling apart. At 4:30 p.m., Mayor Patricia Rodriguez called an emergency press conference. The room was packed with reporters, cameras, and anger. This afternoon, a disturbing incident occurred involving one of our patrol officers and a citizen of this city. She began, her voice tight with controlled fury. That citizen happens to be Johanne Grimes, wife of Police Chief Michael Grimes. She is currently hospitalized after delivering prematurely. Her baby is in the NICU fighting for her life. The crowd erupted with shouted questions. Rodriguez raised her hand for silence. Effective immediately, Officer Dylan Hunt has been suspended without pay pending a full investigation. I have requested that the FBI Civil Rights Division review this case. I have requested that the Department of Justice open an investigation into our department's complaint procedures. And I want to be absolutely clear. What happened today is unacceptable, unconscionable, and will be met with the full force of accountability this city can bring to bear. At 4:57 p.m., his police union issued a statement calling for due process and asking the public to wait for all the facts. By 6 p.m., the video had been viewed 15 million times. The facts were already clear. They were recorded. They were undeniable. And they were about to get worse.
The FBI agents arrived on the third day, led by Special Agent Marcus Webb from the Civil Rights Division. They didn't ask permission. They came with subpoenas for personnel files, internal affairs records, body cam footage archives, and patrol GPS data going back 5 years. What they found was damning. Hunt's GPS patrol data revealed a deliberate pattern. For 3 weeks following Chief Grimes' appointment announcement in the local newspaper, complete with a photo of the Grimes family home on Maple Street, Hunt had systematically altered his patrol route to pass through Riverside Heights multiple times per shift. His usual assignment was downtown commercial areas. He had no legitimate reason to be in that neighborhood at all. The locker room was worse. Officer Brad Stevens, granted immunity in exchange for testimony, revealed Hunt's statements from that morning. Affirmative action bullshit. 2 weeks and he thinks he can change everything. This department ran fine before he showed up. Other officers came forward with similar accounts. Hunt's open hostility to the new chief, his complaints about reform agenda, his comment that someone needed to send a message. Then the FBI pulled Hunt's complete complaint history. 17 complaints over 9 years, 12 involving racial profiling. The pattern was unmistakable. Black drivers in middle-class neighborhoods, pretextual stops, aggressive questioning, unauthorized searches. but Internal Affairs Sergeant Tom Dawson had systematically downgraded or dismissed every single one. The investigators interviewed Dawson under oath. His defense crumbled within minutes. Officers have tough jobs. Sometimes citizens misunderstand their intentions. We have to protect our guys from frivolous complaints. These weren't frivolous, Agent Webb said, sliding forward a stack of files. These were a documented pattern of civil rights violations that you buried. The floodgates opened. The FBI put out a public call for anyone who'd been stopped by Hunt to come forward. Within 2 weeks, they had 34 witnesses. The testimonies were eerily similar. Black drivers, pretextual stops, aggressive questioning, the same suspicion, the same hostility. Destiny Parker, a 28-year-old teacher, testified about being detained for 40 minutes while Hunt searched her car without consent because she looked nervous. Marcus Johnson, a financial analyst, described Hunt following him for 15 blocks before pulling him over for an alleged turn signal violation that video later disproved. Each story revealed the same officer, the same pattern, the same racism that the department had protected for nearly a decade. The Department of Justice report, released 8 weeks after the incident, was scathing. It detailed a culture within the department that rewarded aggressive policing, turned a blind eye to racial profiling, and systematically protected officers with complaint histories. Internal Affairs had become a shield rather than an accountability mechanism. Supervisors who raised concerns were marginalized. The system was designed to protect officers, not citizens. On September 14th, a federal grand jury handed down a 6-count indictment against Dylan Hunt, deprivation of rights under color of law, filing a false police report, assault, battery, official misconduct, and civil rights violations. He was arrested at his home at 6 a.m., led out in handcuffs while news cameras rolled. The badge he'd hidden behind for 9 years couldn't protect him anymore. The trial began on a cold morning in January, 6 months after the traffic stop that had changed everything. Johanne Grimes walked into the federal courthouse carrying her 4-month-old daughter, Amara, who had spent the first 3 weeks of her life fighting for survival in the NICU. The courtroom fell silent as she took the stand. For 2 hours, Johanne recounted every detail, the cramping, the fear, Hunt's questions about what she was doing in that neighborhood, his refusal to let her call her doctor, the shocking racist statement, the violent extraction from her car. Her voice broke when she described feeling her water break, the blood, the terror that she was losing her baby on the pavement while Hunt stood over her claiming she was resisting arrest. The body cam footage played in court, all 23 minutes of it. Hunt's voice, "I was expecting a black blood, and you don't look pregnant to me." The jury watched Johanne bleeding on the pavement. They watched Hunt prevent bystanders from helping her. They watched him lie to dispatch about her resisting arrest. 34 witnesses testified about their own encounters with Hunt. The pattern was undeniable. On February 3rd, after 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all 6 counts. At sentencing, federal judge Victoria Brennan addressed Hunt directly, her voice cold with controlled fury. "Officer Hunt, you took an oath to protect and serve. Instead, you targeted a pregnant woman because of the color of her skin and because her husband threatened your sense of power. You nearly killed her and her child. You violated every principle of justice. This court sentences you to 5 years in federal prison." Hunt showed no emotion as marshals led him away in handcuffs. 3 weeks later, the city settled Johanne's civil rights lawsuit for $6 million, one of the largest settlements in the city's history. On March 15th, Chief Michael Grimes stood at a podium, Johanne beside him holding Amara, now healthy and thriving. His voice was thick with emotion as he announced comprehensive reforms. The Johanne Grimes Accountability Act, mandating independent oversight of all use of force incidents, automatic termination for officers with patterns of racial profiling, and complete restructuring of internal affairs. "My wife and daughter survived," he said, tears streaming down his face. "But how many others didn't? How many voices were silenced by a system designed to protect officers instead of citizens? That ends today."
The cameras captured the final image, the Grimes family, together, scarred but unbroken, transforming their trauma into hope for systemic change. Stories like Johanne's need to be told. They need to be shared. They need to spark the conversations that lead to real accountability and lasting reform. If you want to see more videos exposing injustice like this, make sure you're notified whenever we post. Comment below with your thoughts, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and most importantly, hit that subscribe button. Your voice matters. Your engagement helps these stories reach the people who need to see them. Together, we can demand better. Together, we can create change.